YouTube, welcome back. Today we're going to go through another workout example. This time we're going to go through an upper body session with a back focus. As always, I'm going to walk through a little bit of the thought process behind exercise selection and order. I'm also going to go through the visual, so I'm going to have a video showing the movement and then the verbal cues, so me sort of walking you through what you want to be thinking about as you're performing each movement. If you do enjoy the video, if you do find it helpful, please do drop a like. Drop a comment if you want to see any particular workouts or maybe particular exercises being explained. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe. Okay, so like in the other workouts, I'm going to go through sort of four exercises. 3 of them being back orientated, one of them being a chest movement, because this is going to be a sort of upper body session, so both chest and back, but the majority of it being back as it's a back focused session. Again, you can put movements at the end of a session if you want to maybe hit a bit of arms, a bit of shoulders, whatever split you want to do. It's going to give you a little bit of freedom. I just want to give you an example of the bulk of a potential workout that you could use to give you some ideas, but to again walk you through particular exercises and how to perform them. Now, the way I'm going to order the movements in this particular session is I'm going to put a movement at the beginning that is going to be very taxing on the lower back. We're going to put that in early when we are fresh, when we are not fatigued, when we have a lot of energy. Okay, so it's easier for us to create the stability and for us to be able to use a movement that is taxing the lower back before we get into a fatigued position. Okay, so we're going to start with bent over barbell row, and then as we move forward, we're then going to go into movements where we're in a much more locked in position, whether that's using machines, whether that's using benches, to give us a little bit more support to take that load off the lower back. Okay, one of the things you want to be careful of when you're training something like upper body or even lower body, if you do maybe like a mixed session, is you want to be careful of that lower back loading as the session goes on, as you get fatigued. Okay, in an ideal situation, you probably don't want to be loading that lower back frequently for a session, and towards the end when we're tired, when we're struggling to create that stability, just because again of risk of, well, 1, injury, but 2, how well we can perform the exercise as fatigue builds. So like I said, we're going to start with the bent over barbell row to make sure that we're doing this exercise that will tax lower back in our most fresh and less fatigued state. Okay, so with the barbell bent over row, this is a hip hinge movement. Okay, so you almost want to think about setting yourself into this movement like an RDL. Okay, so you have a slight bend in the knees, you're going to drive those hips back, and you want to drive those hips back until you get that stretch in those hamstrings. Okay, so in the video you'll see those hips are driven right back, upper body's coming over. Okay, now you don't necessarily need to be almost like parallel with the floor to a degree, but you are going to need to make sure those hamstrings are loaded to take a lot of that weight. Okay, again, that's going to take a little bit of stress off that lower back, but that lower back is still going to be loaded. Okay, so make sure that core is nice and braced, make sure you're thinking pelvis to rib cage. Now, as you pull in with the bar, you want to think pulling from the elbow and almost think about pulling to the hips. Okay, we're going to try and focus the majority of this internal focus on our lats. So if you want to think about our lats, we want to think about driving from the elbow to the hips, and think about driving the shoulders back and down to the hips as well. So you can almost think about driving the shoulders into pockets as you pull. Okay, so you're going to drive the hips back, load the hamstrings, core braced, pelvis to rib cage, and you're going to think about driving the shoulders and the elbow to the hips as you pull in. Okay, again, when we want to think about the lats, we want to think about the distance between the shoulder and the hip being short, so that's why we're thinking about driving the shoulders down into pockets to the hips as we pull in. Okay, now moving forward, we're going to continue with targeting the lats. However, this time we're going to do a vertical pull. Okay, now we're going to use a chest supported pull here, chest supported lat pull down. Now you can do this in different ways depending on what equipment you have in the gym, what machines you have. In this video I'm using a cable machine that allows you to pull both handles individually, so I'm setting up a bench to create that stability. So I'm setting up a bench with a slight incline so I can lean into it, so I can make sure that my back's nice and neutral, I'm keeping that core tight again, pelvis to rib cage, and I'm leaning into it so I'm not having to get much thoracic extension, not have to lean back with the movement. You can do similar if you don't have a cable machine like that. You can use a lat pull down, maybe put D handles on the lat pull down so that elbow is following in line with the hip. And again, you can set up that bench so you're leaning into it. Okay. If you're lucky enough, you might even have a machine where you have a chest support and the lat pull down is already there. You don't have to set up a neutral grip bar or D handles, depending on what machine you have. Okay. But the majority of the focus here is having that chest support. Okay, that's what we want. That's going to take a little bit more stress off that lower back. Now, as you pull, again, use D handles if you have to, because we want to think about pulling from the elbows and again down to the hips, and it wants to be in line with the hips. Okay, we don't want to be thinking about elbows pulling out. We want everything in line with the hips because that's going to give us a better connection to the lats. Okay, so as you pull, again, think elbow to hips and think shoulder down to hips. Again, we want the distance between the shoulder and the hip to be short at the bottom to get that good squeeze. Again, like I said, we're taking stress off lower back, so make sure core is tight, pelvis rib cage. We don't want to be leaning back. We don't want too much overextension. Next, we're going to go into an incline chest press to hit a little bit of chest. Again, this is an upper body session, so we're getting some chest in there as well as some back before we move on to, again, another back exercise, just to maybe give the back a little bit of a rest to let it recover a little bit before we go into and hit it again. So with the incline chest press, now what you want to make sure you've got here is the bench wants to be at about a 60-degree incline. Okay, again, you can adjust it slightly. You might get a better connection with your chest at different angles. Play around with it. What I will say is, if you do struggle to, or if you find yourself overextending a lot on the lower back, again, play around with that incline. You might find dropping it a little bit helps. What you can also do is you can also set up a little box or step that you can put your feet onto, which is going to help reduce that overextension a little bit. So play around with that. But if you are finding issues with that overextension, then again, maybe reduce the incline or set up a step to put your feet onto. Because when you're going through a pressing movement, what you are going to want to do is have the shoulders locked back and down and chest slightly risen as you press. Okay, because as you press, you want to think about driving yourself into the rest. Okay, so you're going to drive yourself into the rest or the seat or the bench, whatever you want to call it, and you're going to think about driving your biceps into your chest. Okay, so drive biceps into chest, drive yourself into the bench. And that's the position you want to have all the way through. You want to be locked out. We don't want too much of the shoulder moving forward at the top. We want to keep everything relatively strict and tight. Again, because we're in an inclined position here, we don't want too much extension, thoracic extension, because you're essentially going to turn it into a flat press. So again, play around with the height of that bench, but also use that step if you're finding yourself overextending a little bit too much. And then lastly, we're going to go into a wide grip row. This is to target the mid-back. So obviously we've used a couple of movements to target the lats. Now we're going to use this to target more of the mid-back. Again, we're going to use a chest-supported machine here to again reduce some of that stress off the lower back. You've also got to contemplate, when you go into future sessions, if you go into a leg session tomorrow, there's going to be potentially more loading of the lower back. So everything we do in this session is going to have a knock-on effect on future sessions, right? So you've got to think about these things. So this is why we've had one lower back loaded movement to begin with, and then we've tried to reduce that stress to the lower back moving forward. With this chest-supported wide grip row, adjust the seat so the handles are going to be in line with this mid-back, what we're trying to target here. Then as you pull, think about pulling wide from the elbows. Think about pulling the elbows towards the mid-back, okay, so almost like a semicircle. Pull from elbows to mid-back, drive the shoulders back and down slightly as you pull. Again, you're going to want that slight thoracic extension, but again, lean into that chest, okay, lean into that support, pelvis to rib cage, so we're keeping this relatively neutral, okay. So once you're leaning in, you're going to get a little bit of thoracic extension, driving the shoulders back and down, chest up, and driving from the elbows to the mid-back. So there you have it, that's an example of a potential upper body workout, the bulk of it with a back focus. Again, you might want to add a little bit more volume, you might want to do a little bit more, back work, you might want to put a little bit more chest work into there. This is just an example. You can play around with it. You might want to put a bit of arms, shoulders, whatever you want to do. It's free to you to play around with, to put your own workout together. This is just an example to walk through some particular exercises, to go through the verbal, visual cues, but to also walk you through the sort of thought process of how to put a session together and some things you might want to think about. Again, if you did enjoy the video, please do drop a like. If you've got any questions, throw them down in the comments. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. Catch you on the next one.